Hello everyone! Today we start learning Python programming language, and first of all I want to mention that this course is aimed for very beginners, and this means that you don't need to know some extra things about, I don't know, for example, about algorithms or something like that. Okay, and let me introduce myself. My name is Vladimir Sukhov, and currently I'm a PhD student at the ITMO University. If you have any questions, you can write me by using this email address. Okay, I want to start with a question, and the question is, what is Python? And actually Python is a programming language, and like any other language, this language aimed to give us opportunity to communicate with something or with someone. In our case, we want to communicate with computers, and Python gives us opportunity to communicate with computers. Okay, nowadays there are two different Python versions. I mean, you can find them right now, and there are Python 2 and Python 3. And actually in this course we will learn Python 3 because Python 2 will be deprecated soon, and because of that we will learn Python 3, because Python 3 is a future. Here I'm trying to point some features in my mind, and these features explain why you should start learning Python. So first of all, Python is easy to learn. You can find a lot of different tutorials in internet, and also Python has human readable code. The second point is that Python is very easy to use. You can find a lot of different open source libraries, and for example you can find such libraries for bioinformatics problems, for machine learning problems, and for other. So you can find a lot of different libraries in internet and fetch them to your own projects. And also Python is one of the most popular programming languages, and this point means that there is a huge community around Python, and you will not be alone during this path. You can find a lot of different people, for example, in internet or offline, and talk with them. And so yeah, I mean that you will be able to find answers on your questions. Okay, so now where to get Python? So actually here you can find two different guides how to install Python on your own PC. And actually for today you can use online editor which is called REPL.it. And this online editor almost has all features of Python, and it will be enough for today to work in this online editor. Okay, here is some course structure, but let's skip it. And first of all, I want to show you how you can install Python on your own PC. And in this course primarily I'll use Linux operating system. So here I have a Ubuntu operating system, and in Ubuntu to install Python actually you can use the following command. So sudo apt-get update. So this is the first command, and then you should execute the following one. So sudo apt-get install Python 3. So I will not execute it because I have Python on this PC. And yeah, so actually one thing that you should know before starting this course, it's basic knowledge of Linux operating system. So you don't need to know some stuff about algorithms or something like that, but you should be able to work in command line interface, right? So like I am doing right now. Okay, so Python has two different modes, and this means that we can work in two different modes. The first one is interactive mode and the second one is a script mode. What is the difference? So the first one will work in the following way. So we can run this mode by using this command. So command is just Python without anything. And then we will fall in the interactive mode, and here we can write some Python language, so Python specific language statements, and execute them one by one. So it looks like you have one sentence and you can translate it in Google Translator, for example. And also we can create some specific file with .py extension and give this file to Python, and Python will translate the whole file. So this is this two different ways to work with Python. And let's run Python in interactive mode. So to do it, you should write just command Python, and right now we are inside of interactive mode. And let's start to learn Python with some basic types and operations on these data types. Okay, so let's start from numbers. And actually, to define some number, you should just specify the value of this number. So for example, you can write 10, press the enter button, and here we have our value. So in interactive mode, we will echo this value on the new line. Actually, you can use Python as a calculator. So for example, we can sum two numbers, and these are examples of integer numbers. Actually, you can create a float number. To do it, you should use the following syntax. So you need to specify integer part. So let's specify it like that, and then goes the fractional part of your number. So for example, something like that, execute it. And let's look on some basic operations for numbers. So the first one, it's the sum, and actually we can use this symbol. So this symbol means that we want to make a comment, and everything that goes after this symbol will be ignored by Python. So for example, we can put here some message, for example, for the programmers, for other programmers who will read this piece of code. Also, we can subtract two numbers in such a way. We can multiply numbers, we can divide numbers, and actually Python has two different operators for division. So the first one takes numbers and returns us the result as a float data type, and actually you can use this operator to calculate the integer division. So as you can see, for such operation we get 2. Also we can raise some value in power of some other value, for example something like that, and also we can calculate the remainder of the division, or also this operation is called as modulo operation. And the same operations can be performed with float numbers. Okay, so now let's look on the Boolean data type, first of all. So Boolean data types corresponds to some Boolean logic, Boolean algebra. So here we have two values. So the first one is true. This value corresponds to true and false. And actually we can get such objects, for example, when we are comparing numbers. So in Python you can find comparison operators. So for example, we can compare is 10 less than 5. So let's check it, and we will get false as a result for this operation. Also, there are less or equal operator. It's still false. We can check that 10 is greater than 5. We get true. Greater or equal than 5, true. We can check that 10 is equal to 5. This is a false. And we can check that 10 isn't equal to 5, and this is true. Okay, now let's speak about logical operations. For logical operations, we should apply logical operators for logical values. And operators are logical AND, logical OR, and logical NOT. So, for example, how does it work AND operator? So, AND operator will return us true if both values are true. I mean, the left one and the right one. So, for example, true and true is true, and in all other cases, we will get false. And yeah, so OR works in other way. So OR will return us true if one or both values are true. So for example, true or false give us true. False or false give us false, and all other possible variants will give us true. And NOT operator just reverse our Boolean object. So for example, not false will return us true, not true return us false. Okay, and actually we can combine these operators with comparison operators. So for example, we can check that some value, so for example, let's assume that we have 42 and we want to check that 42 greater than 10 and check that this value greater than 20. And if both statements are true, we get true. And you can find some other, so I mean, you can check some other examples by yourself. Now let's talk a bit about strings. So Python has a built-in type str for strings, and to specify string we should use quotes. And to do it, let's write our first string, and let's write hello world and press the enter. So this is the first one. How can we specify the string? And also you can use just single quotes to do it in such way. And actually I want to tell you that, so right now we are working, as I said, in the interactive mode, and in this case Python automatically prints the last, so the value of our statement. So for example, in this case we get true, in this case we get hello world. But now let's go to the script mode. So let's exit from the interactive mode. To do it, you should write exit with brackets and execute it. So let's create some folder. So for example, Python lessons. So let's go to this folder. Let's create folder week 001. And now let's create new file here. So I'll use Vim text editor. You can use whatever you want. So for example, you can use Visual Studio Code or Nana editor. So whatever you want. Let's create file and let's call it hello world.py. And let's try to put the same string here. So for example, hello world. Now let's save this file and let's try to run this code in the script mode. So to do it, we should write Python and specify the name of our file. Okay, so here's our command. So command Python and the name of file. Our file is hello world.py. Let's execute it, and we don't see anything in the output. Because as I said, in the script mode, we will get the last value, I mean printed on the new line. But when we are inside of the script mode, we will not do it. And to print something to the standard output, you should use the print function. So this is a built-in function, and the syntax is the following one. So we specify the name of our function, then we should open brackets, specify the argument for our function, and close the bracket. Okay, now let's save this file and let's execute it again. And now we have our string in the output, in the standard output. Okay, now let's open this file and let's look what will happen if we have, I don't know, so let's use single quotes to specify our string, and let's put one extra single quote inside of our string. So for example, if we want to write I am a student, and now we save the file and we want to execute it again, we will get a syntax error, and this happened because Python don't understand this line, because so Python thinks that this is our string and here's something else. And we can avoid this situation, for example, by using single quotes to escape our string. So let's save it and execute it again. Now everything fine, but actually you can escape your special symbol, and to do it you should use backslash symbol. So for example, I am a student. Yeah. So let's our file again and let's execute it. And now it works fine because we escaped our symbol and Python understand how to execute this statement. So let's look on our file, and our file is the following one. Okay, and actually you can specify multiple line string. To do it, you should use the following syntax. The syntax is the following one. So print, and for example, you can use triple single quotes or triple double quotes. So let's use triple double quotes, and let's specify our multiple line string. So this is our first line, second line, third line, and let's close it. Let's save this file and let's execute it again. And here we have our multiple line string. Okay, now let's talk a bit about print function. So we saw that we can use it to print some objects to the standard output, and actually you can use it in following way too. So for example, you can specify it, you can run it with one argument, or you can pass several arguments. So actually you can pass any number of arguments to the print function, and print will print them and separate them by white spaces. So let's look on this example. So let's execute, or let's open Python in interactive mode, and let's print 1, 2, 3, and we get the line, and this line is 1, 2, 3, and each value is separated by white space. Actually, you can put here strings, numbers, and print will work fine with such objects. And actually we can change a bit the behavior of this function by using some built-in or predefined arguments, and arguments are sep and end. So let's look how does they work. For example, print 1, 2, 3, and now we can separate these values by underscore, for example, or by some other symbol. So this symbol specified how can we separate our values. And actually you can use end argument. So by default end is equal to this one. So this is a specific representation of new line symbol. So this symbol, so I mean backslash n means a new line symbol. Now let's change it, for example, to empty string, and you can see that we started the new command so I mean here we didn't put a new line symbol after this value, and because of that we have this statement here. Okay, this is everything about print function, and now let's talk a bit about variables. So in Python we can create variables, and actually variables, you can think about them like some containers, and you can store or you can map your objects to some specific variables. And this is a very useful in practice, because for example, if you have a large string, you can assign this string to some specific variable and use this string, I mean use it by using just the variable name. So you don't need to explicitly specify the whole string. For example, like here. So here we have the string hello world. We assign it to variable x, and then in our code we can refer to this string by using just this name. So let's look on the example. Let's exit from interactive mode. Let's create some new file, variables.py, for example, and let's create our first variable. This is a variable example. And now we can print the value of this variable. Okay, and you can put some other values inside of your container. So for example, numbers, Boolean data types, and yeah, so for example, we can perform some operations over this string. So actually I didn't say that but we can use some specific operators with strings. So for example, let's change this one. For example, let's put something like that, and actually we can concatenate two strings. To do it, you should use the plus operator. So let's look on the example without any arguments first of all. So let's save this file and let's execute it. And here you can see that we merge two strings into one. Okay, and also we can repeat some string, and to do it you should use the following syntax. So you should specify your string, then multiply it by some number. So for example, we want to repeat this line 5 times. So let's save this file and execute it again. And here we have repetitions of our string. And now, for example, we can refer to this value, and it's like a shorthand for our string, and we get such result. Also, we can reassign the value, so I mean change the value of our variable. For example, here we have that x is Vladimir at the beginning of our program. Then we can reassign it to some, for example, integer, and I don't know, print x plus 10. Let's save it and let's execute it. And so here we have at the beginning of our program x was the string, then we reassign it to the integer number and print it again. Okay, now I want to show you how can we get some data from the user or from the input. So to do it, we should use the input function, and the general example or general case is the following one. So input, and here is some argument of this function, and argument is prompt. So this function reads a line from input and converts it to string. And if the prompt argument is present, we will write this message to the standard output without a trailing new line. So the input function is a way for interaction with the user. And let's look on the following example. So let's create a new file and let's call it input example.py. And here we can specify some variable. Let's call it x, and let's write input y, one more input, and let's print something. So I mean let's put some string here. So you have entered x, now enter y, and then let's print x is x, print y is y. Okay, let's save this file and let's execute it. So you can see that right now Python waits for us, because inside of our program we have a input function and we should specify something here. So let's write something, I don't know, for example, hello world, and then we should press the enter button. Now we get the message. So you have entered x, now enter y. So let's enter y now, for example 101, and then Python prints results into the standard output. Actually, we can check this example too. So let's open our file again. Let's remove everything and let's write username is input, enter your name, and then hello username. So let's save this file and let's execute it. And we read the input and then we print some message to the user into the standard output. Okay. Now let's talk about type conversion. So as I said, by default we read data and we read it as a string. But if you need to convert it, for example, into the integer or into the float data type, in such cases you can use type conversion. And to convert one data type to another, you should use the following syntax. So for example, if you are trying to convert some string to the integer, you should write int function and specify your string here. Then we can check the type of our value by using this function. So function is type. And actually we can convert integer to string, or we can convert string to the float data type. And let's check some examples. So let's create file type conversions.py, and for example let's read some input. So x is input, enter something, and then let's print type of x. So let's execute this program. So let's execute it one more time, enter something, and let's put something. And here we get that the type of our word of our input is str. So str means string. And then we can convert it. So let's try to convert it to int. To do it, you should write int, open brackets, and put your argument here. First of all, let's enter the same string, and we will get an error because Python don't know how to convert this word to the integer. But if we specify some integer value, I mean, for example, something like that, Python will convert it to the integer, and we can check it. I mean, check the type by using. So let's write print y, and then let's print type of y. So at the beginning we get 101 as a str, then we print y, so here y is 101, and actually the type of y variable is integer. So you can check some other examples of data conversions by yourself. Okay, now let's talk about conditions in Python. So often we need to execute a piece of code only when the condition is true. To do it, we can use if statement, and the syntax is the following one. So you should write the keyword if, place your condition here. So for example, here we check is A greater than B, and if this statement is true, we will go inside of the if statement. So this is the body of our if statement, and we will print the message that A is greater than B. And here is, so I marked here the indentation, and indentation is a way to specify some scope or block of code. And actually we can place here not just one statement, I mean not just the print function, actually you can place here some other statements. And if you place for each line in indentation, I mean if you are using the indentation for each line, all of them will be in the if statement, in the scope of if statement. And basic rule is to use 4 white spaces for indentation. So let's check this example. Let's create vim if example.py and let's create something like that. And now let's check if A less than B, then print A is less than B. And actually we can place some other statements here. A was A, print B was B. Okay, now let's save this file and exit. Let's execute it and let's put some values. So here for A we use 10 and for B we use 100, and 10 is less than 100, and because of that we fall inside of the if statement and we print the first message that A is less than B. And actually we print A value and B value. But now if we change our input, for example, if we input 100 firstly and 10 at the second line, we will not get any messages here. So because when A is greater than B, in this case we will skip all these lines and we will not execute them. So the general case is the following one. So right now we have seen just the example with one if statement. Actually you can have some mutually exclusive conditions, and in this case the general syntax looks like this one. So here is our if statement, so if and here you specify the first condition. If this condition is true, you execute all statements here, and you will not check all other if statements. But else, so if this condition isn't true, in this case you will go to this line and you will check that condition 2 is true. And if the second condition is true, you will execute all statements inside of this condition, and you will finish this general case. But if this condition also false, you will go to the next one, and so on. So if all n-1, so if all actually n conditions are not true, you will fall inside of this scope. So let's look on the example and you will get better understanding what's going on here. So let's create the following one: if elif example.py. So let's read one number, so let's call it x, int input, enter integer number, and here we will convert it to int, and then let's check if x is less than 0, then let's print that x is negative. Else if x is greater than 0, in this case print x is positive, and else print x is 0. Okay, now let's save this file and let's execute it. So for example, if we enter 10, so we get that x is positive. For example, if we insert some negative number -10, we will get that x is negative, and if we use 0, we will get 0. So here is our file. Okay, and actually for the end of this lesson I want to show you loops in the Python. So actually there are two different loops. The first one is a while loop and the for loop. So loops are actions that are performed as long as certain condition is true. And yes, as I said, Python has two different types of loops. First one is the while loop, and here is some toy example. So here we create variable and we call it as I, and we assign to this variable 0, and then we write the keyword while, and here we should place some condition. So if I is less than 10, in this case we will execute the body of our while loop. And here we print I, and then we increase the value of I by 1. So actually this is a shorthand for I is equal to I plus 1. And in this statement we increase I by 1 on each step. And actually we will repeat all these statements until this statement is true, until this condition is true. So let's look how does it work. So let's create vim while loop example.py. So let's create our variable, and while I, for example, is less than 5, let's print I, and then let's increase it by 1. So actually this statement is equal to I is equal Y plus 1. Now let's save this file and let's execute it. So I want to show you the code of our program. So here we have I is equal to 0, and then you can see that we print our 0, then we increase it by 1. So how does it work? So first of all, I is 0. We check. If I is less than 5, in this case we go inside of our while loop. Okay, first of all we print I, we get 0, then we increase this value, I mean our 0, by 1, and now I is 1. We go to this condition again and we check, is I less than 5? So I is 1, and because of that I is less than 5, and we go inside of our while loop again. So we print it, we print 1, then we increase it by 2, and so on. So at the final step we will get, so we will print 4, then we increase our value by 1, and then we check 5 is less than 5. So Actually not, and because of that we have reached the end of our while loop. Okay, and also Python has a for loop, and the general syntax is the following one. So here we use some built-in range function, and actually this range function returns us sequence, and by default it works in the following way. So let's create a new file, let's call it for example.py. So let's write our for loop for I in range of 9. Let's print I. Let's save and quit from this file. Let's execute it, and you can see that we have 0, 1, 2, 3. So our range function, let me print our code. So our range function returns us the sequence from 0 to 9, and 9 is excluded from this sequence. So actually range function takes some start position, end position in general, and step size. And here we specified 9, and actually by default range start position is 0. We just specified end position, and step size by default is 1. But actually we can change start position and end position and step. And to do it, so we should specify our start position. So for example, if you want to start from 2, go until the 9 with step size 2. So you should write something like that. Let's save it and let's execute it again. And you can see that we started from 2 and we go with the step size of 2 until the 9. So 2, 4, 6, 9, 10 is, so 10 isn't inside of our sequence. Yeah, so this is example how for loop works. And actually you can change the behavior of your loop by using break and continue statements. So break breaks our loop. So for example, here we have I is equal to 0 and while true. So this is the example of infinity loop, because if we didn't specify the break inside of this loop will work over and over again infinite times. But here we have, so I is equal to 0 while true, and if I comes equal to 100, we break the loop. Otherwise, we increase our value by 1. Okay, so let's check this example. So let's create while break example.py. So let's create I is equal to 1 while true, and let's write just, so let's print I and increase this value by 1. So let's execute this example. So here we haven't specified break statement, and you will see that this is an infinite loop. So as you can see, we get numbers, and actually I should use some key binding to interrupt Python, and actually I use Ctrl+C to interrupt my program, because otherwise we will get over and over elements from our program. Okay, so now let's adjust it. So for example, if I is equal to 100, we break our loop. So let's write into this file and let's execute it. And now we get all values from 0 to 100, and then we stopped our loop. Okay, and actually we can use a continue keyword. so this one. And in this case, we will skip one iteration. So for example, here we use for loop, and our for loop starts from 0, and then we go to the 10, and 10 is excluded from our sequence. But if I is even number, we will use continue, and that means that we will print just odd numbers from 0 to 9. So let's check this example. So for I in range of 10, if I modulo 2 is equal to 0, then continue, otherwise. So not otherwise, but just the next statement is print I. Okay, let's save this file and let's execute it. And we get all odd numbers for which are from 0 to 9. So that's all for today. Thank you for your attention.